Joining me now is Victorian Libertarian MP David Limbrick. Now, David, the new chair of the Australian Sports Commission, Kate Jenkins, has said, "My vision is for sports to be safe, fair, accessible and inclusive for everyone, with every athlete supported to reach their full potential." Sounds wonderful. But before female athletes celebrate this a little too much, the CEO of Women's Forum Australia, Rachel Wong, reminds us that Jenkins helped destroy the female sporting category when she implemented trans inclusion guidelines in her previous role as a sex discrimination commissioner, Wong writes. So in other words, Kate wants safe, fair, etc. sport for everyone, except women and girls. David, I know you are deeply involved in this issue. Is that a fair assessment, or should we give Kate Jenkins an opportunity to show what she's going to do in this new role?
Well, look, I think what Rachel Wong's saying here is exactly right in that ultimately the reason that different sporting classes were separated between boys and girls is because there's physical differences. And just taking hormones for a period of time doesn't change any of that. The fact of the matter is that females and males are different, and if they want to have sports that are separated, then they should be allowed to do that.
Now, let's go to the energy crisis. New South Wales and Victorian households are facing a very real threat of energy blackouts this coming summer as both states push ahead with shutting down the cheapest and most reliable current forms of energy we have. David, will renewables ever give us the stable energy supply we need? It seems mad, particularly in this state when we're sitting on so much gas, that we could have a shortage.
Well, we've got coal as well in Victoria, which we've been running on for a very long time now. Whether or not you can get to a fully renewable system is more a matter of cost and reliability. And to my mind, it seems pretty risky to go down a path where your entire energy supply is dependent on the weather rather than dependent on what you can mine or what you can get from gas. So I think it's very risky over the long term. I've been saying for a long time that we need to look at other technologies such as nuclear energy. But yeah, we're risking blackouts, and a lot of this is around the infrastructure that they need to build as well. They need to build a web of networks all over the state and other infrastructure like batteries and condensers and all these things, and that's going to take time. It adds complexity, it adds cost, and where you've got more complexity, more cost, you have things go wrong.
Well, you've put up a private members' bill to remove the nuclear prohibition in this state. What are the chances that's going to get up? And with all due respect, why is it left to you to do this? Why aren't the Liberal opposition coming up with these plans and trying to ensure we have safe, reliable energy?
Well, with regards to the nuclear prohibition in Victoria, I just think it's a no-brainer that if people who are against it are saying, well, it's too expensive, well, why have the prohibition? That's not a good argument for prohibition.
No.
Look, as for the Liberal Party, I don't know. They did end up supporting my bill in Parliament, but the current government, I think the Premier today said that she's never going to have nuclear because it's too risky. I would argue it's too risky to depend on the weather and depend on being perpetually dependent on China, which is what we're doing with the so-called cheap renewables.
It is just so dishonest, I think, to try to scare people off nuclear. It's really just ignoring the evidence from around the world. So many countries safely using nuclear energy. We're sitting on the world's biggest reserves of uranium, and we're not. We spoke on the show last night about that promising poll for the Victorian Liberals in the Age newspaper. They're well in front of Labor, according to that poll. Clearly, Victorians are fed up. Those state taxes are hurting. But are the Liberals a viable alternative? How are you seeing their performance in Parliament, and are they coming up with policies that differentiate them adequately from Labor?
Look, I think a lot of the decline in Labor really honestly has to do with Dan going away. A lot of people did like him. And if you look at it, it's quite interesting. The poll shows a decline in support for Labor, but it doesn't show people going to the Greens. The Greens are sort of flatlining, and it's going to the Liberal Party and crossbenchers like Libertarian Party.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, I think it's the first time I've seen it where the crossbenchers combined are actually gaining more support than either major party. So I think a lot of people are saying, well, I'm not happy with the government. Some of those are going and looking at the Liberal Party. Some of them are looking at minor parties like the Libertarian Party. As to whether the opposition is viable or not, look, they've got a lot of problems they need to sort out, I think. But they're trying to unify. How successful that is, I mean, that's up to the electorate, but they've certainly got a lot of problems and they've been on the back foot a lot over the last year.
Well, there's a lot of material that Labor give the Liberal Party, which they never use. I mean, you look at this week, this crazy position and conjecture about the treaty, with the minister making the most remarkable comments about colonisation and stolen land and people being murdered, the sort of things you'd expect to hear from a first-year arts student, not a senior cabinet minister. Why are the Liberals so reluctant to venture into those areas and where they know they're on safe ground? The overwhelming majority of Victorians do not want a treaty.
A lot of these things, I think they're just scared of being called names. Like we saw it with the fracking ban in the last term of Parliament. They were scared of getting called, fossil dinosaurs or whatever, and so they ended up supporting the government on that. We saw it with things around gender medicine and the Change and Suppression Act in the last term of Parliament. And we see it with issues like nuclear as well. Even though the majority of Victorians are okay with nuclear, they don't come out and say, yes, we're supportive of this, like the federal government has been doing, the federal opposition has been doing recently. So I think a lot of it is they're just sort of scared of being called names.
But at the end of the day, you are being called the state's unofficial opposition leader. So it's an honour, I guess.
It is, thank you.
And it's something you really took to during those COVID years where we had the Liberals, again, too scared to challenge some of the crazy draconian policies that we saw in this state. Before you go, we're seeing wonderful things from Argentina's new leader, Javier Milei. He's a libertarian like yourself. Does this give you hope that people will look at libertarians and say they don't just have some good ideas, they can actually govern?
Well, he's been handed probably one of the worst situations that you could ever come up with. The state was totally in chaos, like in every way, financially, socially, everything. And so he's really focused on economic issues. So one of the things he's done, they had a problem with their rental properties, same as what we've got in Victoria. He went to fully deregulate it because they had regulated pricing. So he wanted to deregulate that. They've seen an increase in the number of rental properties being available of over 240% in like a month or so. He's already brought the budget back into surplus, like in only a few months, by slashing the public service. And and also inflation is starting to come down. So I think he's making fantastic headway so far by focusing on solid libertarian policies. And I wish him all the best for the future. I think they're off to a good start considering he's only been there a few months.